So I'm sitting here tonight looking at a framed photo of the new cover for Unprecedented Times, the Tetralogy of 2021 Revisited. And this is it was created, it's a screenshot I took of my own eye, which I had filmed as part of a music video I was making myself for The Sun is Coming in 2021 for the second part of the Tetralogy. And I took a screenshot of, me filming my own eyes with the smartphone, and now it's staring back at me as I sit here about to give a talk about the Unprecedented Times compilation. So let me turn the camera around and face you, and you can see my real eyes. And by the way, the center of this eye that has the COVID spore in there, you see? Because this is the COVID years, or actually year of 2021. There it is. So hello. I believe the last time I did a talk for my page was on New Year's Eve, December 31st. And today I don't want to talk about, new music. Maybe I should preface this with new music. I want to talk about 2021's Tetralogy for a reason. So I'm going to go backwards in time. This is not a talk about new music, although I do have some, another Bowie tribute thing, outside tribute, and also a new This Dark Shroud album, and also a double-length album called Unsocial Mediums, which is literally a compilation of over 6 months worth of material kind of thing, original material that I'm going to be releasing. Let me then shift to this talk itself, the talk proper, which is about this new compilation. Now, I actually, not when I started this channel, but the very first talk I gave for this channel, because when I started the channel in 2019, 2020, it was all music. And 2020, it was the pandemic, right? One of the first major things I did was to create the musical journey documentary, which I recently re-edited and uploaded or shared, how to put that. And actually, it's the first complete version in one 3-hour-long video. It's pretty hefty. But anyway, the first 4 parts of that, which were the kind of the first part of the documentary, was created in 2020 during the pandemic. Everything else on the page up until that point had been music, and then the first talk I gave from this room was in 2021. And what was it about? It was about the first 2 parts of what eventually became my tetralogy. So the very first talk, or talks, because then I did a couple, I think, on that, and then started doing talks on other subjects around music, and then sort of expanded out to talk about all kinds of things. Eventually, I was introducing Hope, which had been my new album, and then even newer, The Sun is Coming, the second part. And then when I got to, in the summer of 2021, I was still here during COVID alone, and doing the talks to save my sanity, and I did one on, it wasn't The Answer is Inside. I did one on what had been called the Plagued EP, which became The Answer is Inside. And I think that was the last one I did. So there were like 3 main talks. And then I think after I had finished the tetralogy and started, I moved on to other things in 2022, The Way Out is In and so forth. Then there were other talks on those things. So the first 2 talks anyway were definitely about parts of the tetralogy, Hope, The Sun is Coming, and the Plagued EP, which again became a full-length album called The Answer is Inside. And then at the end of the summer, I completed the 4th and final part ended up being a tetralogy, 4 parts, which was called, was and is called Moment. And I say was and is, all of these, by the way, are still available, not only on my Bandcamp page, but on any major streaming service like Apple Music or even Spotify, though, you know, I haven't pulled all my music off of Spotify yet because it's kind of a pain. Or, you know, YouTube Music or whatever you use, you can find those albums as albums. Now, one other thing I'll briefly say is that the tetralogy for me at the time, after I completed it, was such a big sort of major, how can I say, not just a major undertaking, but it was like such an important to me thing that I had done, you know, and I'm going to talk about why, and that's kind of the reason I'm giving this talk and the reason I'm doing this new version, which I'm going to talk about and why and the timing. It was such a major accomplishment, or whatever you want to call it, for me personally at the time, that I actually thought, well, you know, I want to do a compilation bringing all 4 parts together in some way, and release that as a compilation. And so I created one called Tetralogy, and it had a cover with my face, with my hair pulled back, that was taken by Akiko Honda, with whom I had been working in late 2020? No, from early 2021. And actually, we filmed the Hope, the song, the music video for Hope together. She filmed it for me, and I edited it. And yeah, I think that's the only one that she filmed from the tetralogy for me. We did some other video work together, mostly like live things, and live in the park playing acoustic. And we were kind of, you know, working together a bit because it was during the pandemic and living in the same neighborhood. And I had played a live show during the pandemic, actually, at a very small venue, very, very small, in the neighborhood. And so we had met there, and she had filmed something, and I had edited it, and we got to talking, and then we ended up working together. So 2021, Akiko and I had been working together. So the photo on the cover of Tetralogy, that compilation, I combined it with some other background from something else. It was a photo from an aquarium in Nagoya, when I had gone to, is that right? Maybe not, maybe I'm confusing it. So I created a 30-track compilation at the time, after I had finished the 4 albums and released them, called Tetralogy, with that cover. And I actually, you know, just today, like, went back and looked at it, because I have it in my Apple, what do you call it? Not Apple Music, music app on the computer. It's no longer available online, published. The albums are as albums, but the Tetralogy 30-track version is gone. I took it off a couple of years ago, I think, or maybe last year even. There were some, you know, similar ideas I had at the time, like in terms of which tracks to put on, which to feature, and even some things in terms of like how to begin and end and ordering. It's not the same. But there were a couple places where I thought, aha, yeah, my way of thinking is kind of similar to what it was then. But in other ways, there were definitely different choices I had made. And actually, I just kind of expanded this a little bit. Tetralogy had been 30 tracks. This had been 21, which is kind of an odd number. And now it's 25. I expanded it only a little bit, but there were a couple things that I thought I wanted to add, and there was one track I think I swapped versions, and I'll explain why. So what is, and why am I doing this now? What is Unprecedented Times, which the subtitle is Tetralogy 21 or 2021 Revisited. Why am I revisiting it? It wasn't just that I wanted to make a new cover, which I kind of like, and I have my eye from 5 years ago staring back at me, staring back at you, or staring at you maybe, or not directly, I hope. I'm into eyes. I don't know. Akiko also took my eyes, and I took it off, but I had one with the eye from the Chaos video where there are close-ups of my eyes. That was taken by Mitsuhiro Nagano, who was also, like Akiko, actually doing video work professionally. And he also, like Akiko, we became friends, kind of like, you know, and he heard my music and wanted to, you know, gratis just do the video, which was cool. We only did that one together, but I go back to that video a lot, and I use sometimes the footage from that for other things. It became a reference point, kind of like Bowie had Major Tom or something, you know, where he could have the imagery of Major Tom again come. So I use some of the imagery from that video, especially when I do different versions of Chaos. I like to sometimes somehow use, re-effectorize, and blend in scenes from that. So the eye. This eye, though, as I said, was from a video that I shot myself. Actually, Akiko also did, like I said, the eyes, and there was a reason that was actually personal for her and had very little to do with me, which I won't go into because it maybe she doesn't want me talking about it, I don't know. But something with eyes, and she was interested in photographing and filming eyes. So in the Hope video that she took, early on, there's the sun behind me, and the sun kind of comes in and out, and it's like I'm wearing a mask, a black mask. It's during COVID, right? And the theme is COVID. The theme of much of this music is COVID from 21. And so my eyes are kind of there in the mask, and the sun comes in and out, and she filmed that. And when I filmed the video for The Sun Is Coming, which is the lead track off the second part, or what became the second part, which actually had started as a remix of Hope, which is why it has the Hope reprise loop of my singing, oh, that's in there because of that. And so that actually linked them nicely and thematically, right? Hope and The Sun Is Coming. Very positive sounding song themes, right? Or like hopeful and the sun's coming during the darkest of times, which sounds like the Minotaur from my Bowie thing in 22. But COVID was the darkest of times for me and for many people. Now I think we live in even darker times, but you know, in a very different way. And I'm sitting here smiling and saying that, although we're living in extremely dark times right now as part of that trajectory. I'll maybe talk a little bit about that at the end of this. We'll see if I want to bring this up to the present a bit. So, but 5 years have passed, and that was the realization that I published Hope, which was the first part of what became the tetralogy. It wasn't planned as a tetralogy or a trilogy or anything. In the beginning, it was just I had a new album I was working on called Hope, and it was actually, and it is pretty, well, very dark, and which isn't a big surprise if people who've heard my music. A lot of my music tends to be kind of on the dark side, but it was dark and noisy, and I had been interested in playing with noise music sort of in 2019 in Fukuoka, and then after I came to Tokyo and I did a show that was like part of a noise music show for the first time. And so that had already been sort of part of my current, at the time, vocabulary. But it's not just that it has noise elements. I had done other albums that were like intentionally very noisy in 2019. It's very different from that, and not all of it's noisy. But it is dark, and it is... it doesn't seem like such a hopeful album with a title like Hope, but the title track, which I improvised the lyrics a cappella with a click, which is why I was later able to remix it as the Pray for India mix when the Delta virus, or the Delta, version of COVID. Like we had Omicron, right? There was Delta, there was Beta and Delta and all that stuff. And in India, Delta had hit really hard and had killed a lot of people, was in the news. And so I did a Pray for India mix during Delta. But the Hope, the original track was a cappella with a click. it was just a cappella. And actually that came at the end of the Hope album. And the opening track, Hope, I put in a kind of ambient backing and a bit of noise at the end. But basically it's kind of an ambient drone that does move. It's not just flat. So it's got a kind of rhythm, like a slow droning rhythm, but there's no drums in it or rhythm in that way. And then the a cappella version. But what comes in between those two bookends, which is Hope and Hope a cappella, is pretty dark and, as I say, at times noisy. There is one completely acoustic and vocal track, and it's not me playing acoustic, it's Sunny Yasuda, who's a friend and collaborator from Fukuoka. And we've done albums of original songs together. We've done covers too. That was our first covers project in the beginning. We started with a live covers project. We recorded some cover things too. But we've had done and have since actually done another in 2024. I released the beginning of the year. Was it the beginning of 24, I think? Marc Lowe, Sunny Yasuda, collaborative album, which is very different from the one we had done during COVID, during the pandemic in 2020. So in 2020, after I moved to Tokyo, I was living with my now ex-girlfriend. We were, in order to stay sane, partially, sending each other back and forth files and creating albums worth of materials. Actually, there's more than one album there, actually. We did one album that ended up being kind of like mainly his acoustic, or what he called the gut guitar, which is actually nylon string, like this, actually. Classical guitar. It's not this guitar, but this is a classical guitar. It has a kind of it's really out of tune, but this goes out of tune immediately unless I tune it. But it has a kind of quieter sound, finger picked arpeggios and things. Anyway, we had done like several songs together, and one of the albums ended up being kind of mainly that, and his acoustic or gut guitar, as he called, and or classical guitar, and my vocals. And for some of those things, I added a little bit of keyboard or this, that, but we also did a number of tracks together that were like with electronic backing, and some of them I had created the backing, some he had, because he was using Logic as well, and he could use, actually he didn't even have a keyboard like this. He had, I think he's just using like the keyboard to input, which you can do, and then sort of, adjusting. But anyway, the last thing we had done until 2023, which became the 2024 Lowe/Sunny album, the new one. So during COVID, right, that whole year 2020, when I was with my ex, we were doing back and forth, and we created this music. And then I had my breakup, which I've talked about many, many, many times, and actually it's part of the story of this. And I moved out, and I moved into this place, which I'm still here. It doesn't look like it did then, but it's the same apartment. And then I don't remember how it went. I think I asked him if he would do another collaboration, or if he wanted to, if he had anything. I don't remember how it was, but I remember he sent me the one kind of lengthy guitar improvisation, basically, on the acoustic, and he said, do what you want with it. If you want to cut it up, break it into pieces, or throw parts of it out and just use what you need to use, do whatever you want with it. And I was like, this is great, thank you. So I kind of mixed it and tweaked, the sound a little bit into shape. And then I didn't cut anything. Actually, what you hear on the track, which ended up being called Is Happiness a Verb on the Hope album, I just did an improv in one take. Literally, I just ran it, record, and improv that whole thing. And I didn't cut it. I didn't cut his part. I didn't cut anything. I later went back and mixed and, I think put little effects on some of the vocals and some of the guitar, a little reverb, that kind of thing. Obviously, I went back and did that later, but the vocal line was literally as you hear it. There's no cuts in his guitar, but there's no cuts. I remember the very end, the way he had sent it was kind of a little demo-ish, like it sort of cut that last note, which is important. So I went in and tweaked it and put a reverb blast on it, so it kind of go bing at the end. But other than that, I literally didn't, make any incisions into his file, if that makes sense for those of you who mix or can conceive of what I'm saying. But other than that one little tiny tick at the end to make it cleaner and mixing the whole thing and balancing it, it's literally his part and literally my vocal, boom, one time. And I think he just did one time. He's like that. I'm like that. That's why when we collaborate, we often just do improvs. Like on stage, we'll just improv for 30 minutes. We did last year, 2025 at Fukuoka Yutero. There's a 30-minute long improvisation, the two of us, and that's just totally... And actually, I was singing parts of the songs we did together during that, which made him laugh, which was cool, and that was spontaneous on stage too. But blah, blah, blah. So this is the backstory about that track. That was the last one that we had done, like I said, literally until 3 years on, when he suddenly contacted me, said, "Hey, I've got some tracks. You want to collaborate? Let me send you some stuff." I was like, yeah. And that became the 2024 album, which is Marc Lowe, Sunny Yasuda. What is it called? Has Angels in the title. There were all these Angels albums in 24. Angels of Chaos solo, Angels of Time, and Angels Are Watching. No, that was a track from Angels of Chaos. I'm going to look it up and put in the subtitle. What was it? I could look it up, but it has this, the jacket is the sky, and it's... Oh, I can't remember. That's strange. Anyway, so Happiness is a Verb is the only acoustic track, is what I wanted to say, giving the backstory on it on the Hope album of 2021, the first that was released. That album was released on my birthday, February 26th, 2021, but it was completed at the end of 2020. So right now, that album is over 1 year old in actuality, but in terms of release date, it will be 1 year old on February 26th, 5 years old. So in terms of date, it will be 5 years old on February 26th, my 53rd birthday this year, which means that Tetralogy, essentially 2021, all four of them, 2026 is now 5 years old. So for the 5-year anniversary of this thing, which was so important at the time, and which revisiting, which it's called Revisited, I think stands the test of time for me anyway. I'm not a famous artist. Not so many people have heard the Tetralogy, or maybe some of my friends have heard some of it, or know the song Hope, or know the song this or that, or whatever. But yeah, it was important, and it is, and it marked a very important time for me and for the world. And so I thought, well, whether or not anybody cares, because it's whether or not anybody cares about anything, right? I mean, I'm not doing this for money or for my ego either. I do it because I do it. And I'm doing this talk because I want to do this talk. And I printed this out and put it up because I wanted to do it, right? So actually this cover I created last year, and I created this compilation last year, but just today, because before doing the talk, I had rediscovered the Tetralogy comp in my drive and looked and kind of compared and thought about, and I added a couple things, and I flipped one track, as I say, out for another version of that track to give it more, because actually I used a remix. I'll talk about that later. Actually, because that's coming. The second album. I just talked about Hope. Let me finish the talk about Hope. Exodus is on here. Exodus is a long instrumental, dark instrumental track. I played drum improv on top of that a few times in the studio and live once or twice. I think once in Tachikawa. I don't play at that live house anymore since the pandemic. But yeah, so Exodus is like a long soundtrackish, dark soundtrackish track. What did I put on from Hope? Happiness is Happiness a Verb with Sunny. Hope is on here in both versions, and there are other versions that I'll explain later that come from other things that came later. There are different versions I did, but the two versions, the bookends, are on. And what else is important from Hope? There's actually a mental ward track with Goda Takeshi, my friend who used that name, which is the name of a character from Doraemon, which is a Japanese animation thing, but it's not his real name, but he and I collaborated in 2020, and I used some of the tracks we had recorded together, and I actually put a different mental ward on here. So there are some special tracks on this compilation I want to talk about. Special means they came from somewhere else, like different versions or different things that are related, recorded around the same time. The mental ward track I used was not the one on Hope, which was, I think, 19. I don't remember the numbers were like, there was like 9, 13, and 19 or something. There was, I think, 3s and 9s. I think, anyway, the one on Hope had the subtitle Breathe. And the one I put on here is a different version that we had done. It was actually, I think, the first track I had created at the beginning of 2021. The beginning of 2021. Because the Hope album, as I mentioned, I had actually literally completed prior to its release date. So I had tweaked it. Anyway, so Mental Ward, Exodus, the 2 versions of Hope, it's Happiness of Verb, and I could check the track listing. What else? There's some other things. The Sun is Coming was the second one, and as I say, the whole thing started with me. I was going to do a remix of Hope, and I started remixing it, and I used that ooh, which ends the track. All these trucks announcing. It's really annoying. And it's all these politicians, and I won't talk about the present Japan right now, but there's a political truck running down the street. My window is slightly cracked, that's why. So, The Sun is Coming started with that remix, and it ended up being not a remix, and I realized it was something else, and I left that in, that but I put a new vocal line in. That was like Hope was improv. His Happiness of Verb is improv. Actually, pretty much everything on that, on Hope and on The Sun is Coming, except the acoustic songs I'll talk about, those kinds of things were improv. So The Sun is Coming, also improv vocals. This year, we step out into the sun. We've been waiting for this moment for so very long, and right, the sun is coming for us all. So that became The Sun is Coming, and that became the kicked off the album for me. And then, I mean, there's all these stories behind that I could go into. Actually, Akiko and I did do another one that ended up being a kind of a video from the series, which was Bird, which I re-entitled Broken Wing that year. That was an older song I'd written in 2016, at the very end of 2016, December, in Fukuoka, when I had first actually, well, I won't go into it, but it was a kind of broken, sad love song. So Broken Wing is part of the lyric. This song had been called Bird, and I wanted to give it a new title, so I called it Broken Wing, and in parentheses I put Bird 2021, and I played that on my Ibanez acoustic, which I had been playing at the time, and that got me back into playing the acoustic. Hope has none of my acoustic on it. As I said, it's only got Sunny from that one track. The rest of it's electronic or electronica and noisy and this and that, or a cappella, or right, Hope is ambient with just the drone. But the first song I recorded for acoustically for The Sun is Coming was Bird, or Broken Wing, and I put the sound of these reeds blowing the wind that I had sampled recently, and actually that was also with Akiko, because she had filmed me actually playing Bird acoustically outdoors, and it was really windy, and she hadn't had the thing to cut the wind noise out for the mic on her. She had a professional camera, it wasn't a smartphone, huh? And you put this kind of feather thing on the mic to keep the wind sound out, and she hadn't brought it with her, and she filmed it, and it was too windy and the audio was unusable, but the video was beautiful. And I remember we were like, oh man, at first it was like, oh, what a shame, it looks so great. And I said, I have an idea. I had done this with 2020 with Chaos. My ex-girlfriend had filmed me on her smartphone performing it, and the same thing, it was really windy and the audio was at times really noisy. So I had at home recorded a new version of Chaos with the guitar and the vocals separated, and mixed it and then synced it. And the parts I couldn't sync, I added different video. And I said, I did that, but this time I have the video and I can go home and hook up my mic, and in Logic, I can just play the guitar to it, just follow basically what I see on the screen. It was kind of dark, so it didn't have to be perfectly synced, just kind of basically so it'll fit the timing. And the same with the vocals. And I'll just sing the vocals, and then I'll just make like a music video out of it. And it'll have like a studio new version of my song Bird. I'll just do a new version. And I did. And that became the album version with the reed sounds I mixed in. And then the video I also synced and created from her video. So that actually became a video, like a music video, which wasn't planned as one. It was planned just as a live outdoor thing, like we did in the park later, acoustically, which was literally just live acoustic playing, but the sound was from that time. But so Bird became the first, and then I ended up revisiting the song that I re-entitled also, What Had You Done, which had been called Forest, which was a song that I co-wrote, I co-wrote, I guess you could say, or was co-written by a guy named Nakamura, Ryuiji, who was a bass player actually, but he, played the guitar. Most bass players can play guitar. And he said, Mark, all your songs at the time, 2016, when I was in my band and everything, I was playing the Ibanez, always playing with a pick, jaka jaka, we say in Japanese. I'm just, wang chang, jaka jaka, and with the pick. And he said, you have a good singing voice and different expressions and different things you do. And, if you learned arpeggios, you could really do something, good, I think. And I think arpeggios would be good for your music and your voice and suitable. And so he kind of said, I'm going to write this song that'll be easy enough for you to play or to learn to play. And you can create a vocal part and then, practice it. And I was like, okay, cool, great. So he came to my room one day. I was living right in Fukuoka at that time. And at that time, we had a drummer along with us. And he kind of it was very different the way he played it. And I did this. This is actually, I didn't tune it. It's really out of tune. I should have tuned it. I don't have my tuner, but yeah, that's good enough. So he played like, it's not really in tune, but it's not in tune, like this. And I changed, right? My arrangement is really slowed down. It's really out of tune. That's really too bad. I should have tuned it and done that properly. But anyway, where's my tuner? I had it. So that became, I changed from Forest. I changed the arrangement. I changed some of the lyrics. I updated it, if you will. And I called that What Had You Done, which is part of the lyric. The original, too, had What Had You Done in it as part of the kind of chorus. So I changed the title. And that became, right, so there are two bona fide, two acoustic songs that I play that were my songs, the one with Ryuiji and Bird, which was my song, that I wrote in 2016. And I did those two. The Sun Is Coming. And it was like 7 tracks. It was a short album, actually. But one of my favorites of the tetralogy, in a way. It's still, in a way, my favorite, I think. It's not nearly as noisy and dark as Hope, on the whole, the album. Hope is also a longer album, has more tracks and longer tracks like Exodus. I also did Inner States of Mind. That was actually the final track I created for Sun Is Coming. Inner States of Mind, I had done actually a Jeff Buckley cover for a song called You and I, and it's not the version, if anyone is a Jeff Buckley fan out there knows his work, if you have his the demos or where he's in the studio playing acoustic, and there's the album, actually the demo album is called You and I, And there's a track called You and I. He's talking about a dream he had about AIDS rally and this and that, and he's playing it. This is not the song. The demos for what is it? My lover, my lover the drunk, my darling the drunk. Why can't I remember? My sweetheart the drunk. My sweetheart the drunk, which his mother actually posthumously, like, she found the demos and, you know, put them, kind of organized them into a double CD, right, at the time, and had that released. The end of the first CD, or the first part, first album, the first half of these demos for his My Sweetheart the Drunk demos is called You and I, and it's like a drone almost. It's like he doesn't really even play guitar. It's like a drone, and he sings very emotionally. It's a dark piece, and I had covered that in my own version with a drone, with you know, using Logic and the keyboard, and creating an atmosphere and with some change in it, but it didn't have beats. Which actually I had remixed that too before. I did an unofficial remix of that, which is on my I'm a DJ collection. And I also sing on that and put some piano into that. But I did my own cover version, which I was originally going to release on The Sun Is Coming. And last minute, if you will, I mean, I wasn't in a rush, but as I was like kind of finishing up the album, originally my demo version had that on it. I thought to myself, you know, I mean, I love the song, and I'm happy with the way the cover version, my version turned out, but I want to publish it as an all original album with no covers on it. It was just my idea at the time. And I thought, I know that I can just write something new. And that was when I created Inner States of Mind. And that's an important track too, I feel, from that album. That, again, improvised lyrics, some Buddhist themes, and a little bit about my breakup. Just really snuck it in at the end, because You and I, although it's a cover, is really kind of getting deep into that thing. I haven't talked about that much in this talk. I don't want to talk about it too much, but I had a breakup in 2020 and come here. The Tetralogy is more about, I think, solitude and COVID and all the stuff around that than it is about the breakup, because I think I hadn't yet processed it yet. And it wasn't until the following year in 2022 that I would really start digging into that, going down into that dark well, to use the Murakami Haruki metaphor, going down into the well and digging out that dark stuff from the relationship stuff, especially, mainly would start in 2022. And You and I, in fact, then appeared on an album that dealt with that, called Dark Planet, which also had, by the way, a remix of Inner States of Mind, which also I put on this. Even though it's from the next year's album and it's a remix, it fit. So there's the two versions. The original version from Sun Is Coming, which, again, just the very last line, I say, it didn't last. It's kind of, I snuck that in there, it didn't last, and that's kind of was about that. But mainly it's not about that. It's about COVID. It's about surviving what we were going through. We've seen these days, we've seen things we never thought we'd ever see, or we've gone through things we never thought we would be able to endure, kind of lyrics. It was really what it turned into. So You and I is like more about, right, you and I, and that became next year's 2022's Dark Planet song. That track was eventually released later. Okay, so this reminds me too, one other thing about Hope I didn't mention. The one track that does have that kind of thing with the relationship is He Said, She Said, and that's actually on this too. That's a really dark and noisy, maybe the darkest, noisiest track on the album. It's got beats and it's got kind of noisy stuff going on. All right, the third part, I want to just explain that before, if memory serves, before I created the third and then fourth final part, which again hadn't been planned even at that point as being a tetralogy or a 4-part series, but I kind of knew I was on that path of creating things around, right, COVID, and so I was adding on to what I had done, Hope added with The Sun Is Coming, and then when I started working on my next original album, it kind of made sense because the themes were kind of the same again. The Answer Is Inside, and finally, as I said, Moment. But before I get to those two, I took a kind of pause. I needed to get my head out of that space for a bit. And I went back and just remixed my own material from 2017, 18, thereabouts. Songs, electronica songs I had done. Phantom, electronic version of Phantom I remixed. I remixed Black Nail and The Dials in the Bathroom, which are like those standard things that I keep coming back to, right? 2023, I did This Dark Shroud, I did new version, and then 24, I did new mixes of those things. I'm constantly coming back to those. But other things too. A Piece of My Mind is another track that kind of got lost in the shuffle, and I did a remix of that, electronica track, and etc. And that was called Redux. And it was a kind of compilation of remixes from 2018, 17, 18. So I was quite happy with that, and actually I am. That doesn't exist online now, but I'm going to be republishing some of those mixes in a different format with other tracks eventually. Actually, they're on I think it's on my Bandcamp now. And those mixes say Redux 2021 mix in parentheses, so you can see. It's not the full Redux album, but it's like a good chunk of it. So, and then after I'd done that Redux album, there may have been some other little things I did, but my next main project was The Answers Inside, and I had started improvising with my acoustic, with my Ibanez in the studio. During COVID, I would go to the studio alone, kind of like now. My lifestyle hasn't changed that much since COVID, actually. That sort of set the standard. Another reason this is important to me. I would go into the studio and I started fiddling, because usually I would just play my songs on the Ibanez, either with a pick or with arpeggios. And one session, at the end of the session, I just plucked the string and started singing Hope, and then just started doing. And then I was like, oh, that's cool. And I filmed it and had the video and the audio. And then I was like, I'm going to play around more. So by the time I did The Answers Inside, I wanted to do a guitar improv with an improv vocal atop it. And that became The Answers Inside. I put effectors on it. It was acoustic guitar, the Ibanez, but I used a kind of delay with a little flanger kind of thing effect on. You can hear on the track, and then I improvise the vocals like 2 days later at home with the mic. So I recorded the guitar improv in the studio, and a couple days later I improved the vocal line atop it at home and mixed it and put some like sounds of people in the background, stuff that I had sampled. That was the third. And then the third album, The Answers Inside, also had originally a song from my deceased friend James Izzo, who died actually the first year I came back to Japan, Fukuoka 2011, to teach. Unfortunately, he died in his 30s. He was very young. And it was a tragic, for me, a shock to me. I knew he had been ill. But anyway, so I did a song for him when I was in Fukuoka called Boy Without Hands, because he was born without hands, but he played the keyboard and he was an electronic musician. Incredible guy. And I changed the title to I Love That Boy, but it was basically Boy Without Hands, which you could say was the demo or something, or the original version. I did a new mix of it. Actually, I had the original tracks, the original vocals on there, and put it on The Answers Inside. And I later became my own revisionist and thought it was too up-tempo, because it's kind of like a techno song for that album. And I thought I'll do it later. And I did. In 2022, I again remixed it. And I put at the very end of the year on another album called The World Was Not the Same, which is a double-length album that has a different mix. But the mix from The Answers Inside I quite like. When I went back and listened to it, it's quite different. I compared it. I thought they were more similar. It's actually pretty different in various ways. And I thought, it's really cool, this mix. So I brought that back. That's on this. That's not on The Answers Inside. If you go to streaming, you won't see it there. So that one's revived and back. And the other version's on, like I said, 2022. The World Was Not the Same. That version was published then. It still exists. You could compare them now from this version. But what else? The Answers Inside. There's also an electronica version of What Had You Done, which is called Lonely Child. I think it has beats and stuff, but it's the same vocal line, but it's all electronica. There's no guitar in it. It's a different version. That's also on this. What else was from The Answers Inside? I'm trying to remember. which songs came from that. I had done, I think I'll Take You Home, but I didn't put that, I think, on this one because that's been on so many other acoustic things. I didn't repeat that. That was also an older song I re-recorded on the acoustic. It's a nice version. I quite like it, but it's not on this. I had to cut some things to make it 25 tracks. And so on. I should probably wrap this. This talk's getting quite long. And actually, pretty hot on the heels of The Answers Inside, I created the Moment album. The Moment album also has some, it's a mixture of new and older things. The title track Moment also, I use some of Goda, Takeshi's, I think noise stuff on that track or something, or maybe his flute sax or whatever. He created his own instrument using a sax mouthpiece on a flute. And one of my spoken word bits for my own talk about vaccines in Japanese. But also that had like older songs re-recorded, like Doppelganger, which was a song I had done in my band days. I put that on this. Today We Are Alive, which I did not put on this. It was on Tetralogy. That's another song that's on a lot of my acoustic things. I didn't add it to this. But I did put Doppelganger because I don't much perform that song anymore. And it's interesting arrangement. There was a tribute to Coil that's not on here. It's a very long track, 12 minutes. Moment. And also trying to remember what else. Oh yes, well, there's importantly, it's also acoustic, but very much again improvised. And it was improvised in the studio live on the spot in one take with vocals and guitar together. And I filmed it and made a video from it and created the audio from it, which is Hope Regained. And that was a different version of Hope, which is on here. It's toward the very end of the compilation. So that's also on this. That's a really important one, and it sort of ties the different Hope versions together. I added to this a Hope improv from 2022 live in the studio as well. So there are really various versions of Hope on here that can be compared. That was, again, when I'm improvising, I was further into the improv style and started doing my neck and body tapping like I start, doing that style. Actually started toward the end of 21 and then into 2022. And then I got my guild guitar, which I play it that way. So I think there's a lot of precedence for things. Unprecedented Times, I didn't mention, right? That track that also comes from the Sun Is Coming, which is a kind of spoken word track at the end of that album. That's on here too, huh? And Wildest Wind, which was that is a cover, IAMX. I was listening to a lot of IAMX in 2021. I discovered IAMX in 2021. Chris Corner, kind of electronica artist, but he also does acoustic stuff. And what hit me was that he's around the same age as I am. He does electronic and acoustic, and he kind of works on his own and does his own thing. He's got a band, but he does his own thing. And we're very different in terms of like lyrics, and he's very kind of into, how can I say, bodily sexual things and SM and all kinds of whatever. He's got his own world, and I respect that for what it is. Wildest Wind is a very beautiful piano ballad with electronics in it, and I wanted to do it, so I did my own arrangement, and that was on The Answers Inside. And actually I had several mixes I did, and so I put a different mix on here. I think it has more drums, and it's more like the original version, arrangement-wise. The version that went on to, again, Revisionist, I ended up putting on Answers Inside at the end, was less. I think there's drums just at the very end. It's mostly strings and piano. So that's a different version. I'm just recalling things as I talk here. So this is 25 tracks. And again, there's some B-side things, some alternate mixes, even like some tracks have two versions, like Hope has several, and there are two mixes, two versions of Inner States of Mind, the original and the remix from 2022's Dark Planet. As I say, in 2022, I did The Way Out Is In, was my first album of that year, the first new album I had done after Moment, and that has a lot of acoustic improv, a song called Omicron, which was a follow-up to the track I did COVID in 2020 on the Untitled album, which I haven't talked about the Untitled album. Untitled album was really the precedent for the Tetralogy, and the Tetralogy led to other things, obviously, in 22, and my style really changed with the Tetralogy, in terms of, it became more, in a way, it was the point where like the music went from being just about me and personal things to being about me in the realm of everyone else's, like going through this kind of thing together, and then moving into more sort of political and outward looking things. But at the same time in 22, I also dealt more with my own wounds, or whatever you want to call that, the trauma or the wound or whatever you want to call it, or just like fixing myself, or however you want to put that, in solitude here, and the breakup and the aftermath, because COVID continued. I was still here. I'm still here. I'm still single, but I'm a different person. And this period was especially important. And so what came after, Ukraine war broke out February 24th, 2 days before my birthday that year. And from that point, I mean, I was already doing a lot of improv, and my lyrics were becoming more sort of political, if you will. I did Ukraine piece, 30-minute Ukraine piece, and started going off on that right at the end of 22. As I mentioned, the world was not the same, was about what I saw as the rise of fascism, or fascistic kind of things happening around the world after post-Ukraine, which now we see that very strongly. And my music has become more and more, unfortunately, sort of political in that direction, not because I'm trying to preach to anyone, but because I can't but not see, feel, and think about, and it seeps out, it comes out, especially when I'm improvising into my lyrics. The Bowie tributes have political aspects. It's science fiction combined with reality fiction, Neuralink and all that, and the politics of all this stuff. I'm not going to talk about politics now, but the tetralogy was very much, for me, it was a bridge to many things. Again, if I were to mention one or two other albums, well, the two 2020 bookend albums, one of which doesn't exist anymore except in fragments. There's the Untitled album, which was during my breakup. And then after I came here, the first album I did was with the Self-Control was the lead track, which I redid with Sunny's guitar on it, version of that too. But that album kind of was broken into pieces. And then the Tetralogy of 21, the Redux album, and then, like I say, moving into 22, my sound changed. I started doing more guitar improvisation and neck and body tapping. My style changed. I got the Guild acoustic, stopped playing the Ibanez so much, started playing the piano more, and etc. And the world has changed, and I have changed, and still here. And so mark 5 years since Hope, and essentially since the Tetralogy, like it's 10 years since Bowie died, it's 5 years since my Tetralogy this year, I'm sharing this. This is important to me. Actually, several months ago, like 2 months ago, maybe, end of 25, I put out an audio-only Tetralogy period. It was part of this project, like 10 tracks of like studio improvs and several live performances. I was only able to do like a few that year, but I put some of those together. I made a compilation of like my in-studio improvs and things from 21, 22, doing songs like Hope or Inner States of Mind. I started doing that as in like play the backing tracks with beats and doing an improvisation. The backing track I used for that with beats actually became the basis for the remix I ended up doing for Dark Planet, which is on here. So all these things connect. So yeah, this was the changing point, musically in many ways for me, personally, the way all of my lyrics became improvised. I think they were sort of moving in that direction before, but like up until 2019 in Fukuoka, the songs I was still doing some Japanese A mellow, B mellow, A verse, A, B, chorus, kind of songs. And some of those, again, the acoustic songs like that I redid for the Tetralogy are like this, but they became really looser, more improvisatory in many ways. Like the Untitled album, much of that was like that too. But the song Room from that, and also Self-Control from 2020, those are more like composed songs. So really those were maybe the last composed songs, other than other things I may have done from time to time. The Tetralogy was mostly not like that, right? Inner States of Mind, very loose. Hope was improvised. I keep mentioning these songs. And then the remade songs, the acoustic songs, those had their construction already in place, I was still using a click for Bird, Broken Wing, and the tracks on the Tetralogy, Doppelganger. What changed after that is I stopped using the click, and then my acoustic songs, I never use the click anymore. So unless I want to remix with beats, then I use a click intentionally so I can put the beats in with electronic beats if I want to do that. But otherwise, I don't use a click. So all these things started changing, although I was still using a click during the Tetralogy. But those things started changing, get looser, more improvisation, more improvised lyrics, lyrical themes. Went from COVID to more political things, especially after Ukraine hit, and dealing with the breakup more sort of post-Tetralogy after it had sunk in a bit. But there's a bit of that on the Tetralogy too. But it was mostly me trying to step outside of that, I think. And it wasn't until early 2022 that I really started to just, I couldn't help myself but just start to really, boom, deal with that. And that became the way out is in, and forget the past, which I'm not going to talk about that now. And onwards, so 5 years. Thank you very much. I think the Tetralogy for me remains an important work. I think this new revisited compilation will shed a new light on it. It's different than the compilation I did 4 and a half years ago, or 4 years ago, the end of, maybe I released it at the beginning of, I think the beginning of 2022 or something, right? Or the end of 21 or the beginning of 22. It was really soon after I'd finished, and the year ended. It was like several months later. But so this is revisited, and it's how I am looking at it today, even though there's no new material on it. And it's all from 21. The latest tracks from my studio improv in 22, and the Dark Planet remix in 22. And I think there's a remix of The Sun Is Coming from 22. So the latest things on are from the following year, which are just remixes or in studio improvs. So that's my talk. And again, I said I'm not going to talk about current politics or the cars going by with the political announcements. That's not tonight's talk, and this is almost an hour. And whether or not I edit this, this is what it is.